this conference, and welcome everybody. There's many people from all over Europe in this event about territorial cohesion, and the first person that is going to introduce the conference is the Vice-rector of the ISCTE, Professor Isabel Salavisa. She has the word to introduce this conference in the name of the institution. So please, Isabel.
Okay, good morning. My name is Isabel Salavisa. I'm a Vice-rector for Research of ISCTE. And on behalf of ISCTE, I would like to welcome you to this conference on territorial cohesion trends and policies, organized by DINÂMIA'CET, one of our research centers. Territorial cohesion remains an important issue in the European Union and in Portugal. After decades of European integration, it seems to be a never-ending task, an unattainable moving target. Generous support from European funds has not yet succeeded in drastically reducing territorial asymmetries in Europe and Portugal, although it has certainly contributed to improving living conditions in less developed regions. Why? What should be done? How realistic is it to expect a better future in depressed or declining regions? The pandemic, despite the social and economic crisis it has caused, has driven new ways of living in territory through the extension of teleworking and teleteaching and learning, opening new windows of opportunity for rural territories. Digital technologies have enabled these new ways of life. Secondly, a change in values and attitudes towards the relationship with the nature and rural areas is also underway. And finally, many medium-sized inner cities and towns have experienced remarkable improvements and development over the last decades. These are, in my view, signs of hope, certainly, for those regions. I believe that this conference, honored by the participation of the European Commissioner for Cohesion Policy, Professor Elisa Ferreira, the Portuguese Minister for Social Cohesion, Professor Abrunhosa, the Vice President of the Committee of the Regions, and a representative of DG Territory, as well as Dr. Eduardo Medeiros, the organizer, will help to advance our understanding and improve our action. A warm welcome and thanks to the organizers and to all participants at this conference. Many thanks.
Pedro, now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Eduardo. Good morning to all. On behalf of DINÂMIA'CET-Iscte, I would like to welcome you all to this Territorial Cohesion Trends and Policies Conference. Allow me some brief words on our activity at DINÂMIA'CET to frame the importance of this conference to us. DINÂMIA'CET, that is Center for Socioeconomic and Territorial Studies, is an interdisciplinary research center unit based at ISCTE with more than 200 researchers. DINΑΜIΑ'CET combines fundamental and applied research on economic, social, and cultural topics, contributing to the understanding of the contemporary world through the analysis of socioeconomic and territorial change. This is the core of our research, with special attention to the dynamics and changes of the Portuguese society. And combining in its research the analytical and normative levels. And that way, DINAMIA'CET gives particular attention to public policy and to the institutional frameworks in which social activities play a role in our societies. Social and economic activities. DINÄMIA'CET research gathers researchers from a wide range of academic backgrounds, economics, sociology, law, architecture, regional and urban planning, anthropology, geography, management, quantitative methods, and so on, working in 3 research groups, one that is innovation and labor, another one that is cities and territories, another one is governance, economy, and citizenry. The territorial cohesion issues and the territorial development are therefore at the heart of the research done at DINÄMIA'CET, particularly in its research group cities and territories, and are regularly approached from an interdisciplinary perspective. In addition to this, the study of public policies and governance mechanisms is also transversal to all research conducted at DINÄMIA'CET, including naturally territorial development policies at European, national, regional, and local levels, as well as spatial planning. The theme of this conference is thus particularly relevant from the perspective of ISCTE and DINÄMIA'CET, and we are thrilled to welcome it, even if in the virtually format, in the Zoom format, and naturally expecting that briefly we can host you again, but on a presential mode in other events that can follow. I would not want to fail to highlight some features that make this conference particularly pertinent. On one hand, the role of academic institutions in the study studies on the territorial dimension of policies, and the potential of its holistic and multi-conceptual perspective for the development of those policies, in the perspective of support to formulation of public policies, the support to implementation and assessment of those policies, all aspects in which DINÄMIA'CET has been working for many years. On the other hand, I would like to highlight as well the importance of delivering knowledge on territorial cohesion trends in order to align development and cohesion policy strategies. The opportune timing of this conference is also something that should be stressed. Naturally, it would be important in a moment when it is starting the implementation of a new programming period for the EU structural funds. But the challenge is brought by COVID-19 crisis and post-pandemic recovery, as well as the fundamental role that structural funds and territorial cohesion policies undoubtedly will have in this context, bring new layers and complexity to this that naturally urge to be discussed. As head of DINÄMIA'CET, I can't help but thank Eduardo Medeiros vehemently for his initiative and for creating the conditions to join us together in this discussion here today, and particularly to bring it to DINÄMIA'CET. It is not so usual to be able to join together in the same room the diversity of perspectives and relevant personalities that we have here today on territorial cohesion trends and European Union cohesion policies. We will have the perspectives of relevant protagonists at the level of the European Commission, Portuguese implementation practices, both at regional development and special planning levels, or the Regions Committee. We will discuss territorial cohesion and territorial agenda, linking development strategies and spatial planning. All these will be certainly very stimulating. I wish you all a fruitful work and will be interestedly and attentively listening to the interventions that will follow, certain that this debate will enrich us all. Thank you again for your participation, both to our audience, that is very extensive as I see now, and to all the intervenants on this conference. Thank you very much.
António.
Hello, good morning for everyone. Thank you to be here. We hope have a very useful and a big debate with, from the cohesion perspective and all the policies we need to address in the near future. And it is a constant concern for us. Just 2 or 3 remarks for the conference procedures. First of all, we're going to have 5 presentations. Each presentation will be followed for 2-3 questions. I ask everyone who wants to address questions to put it by chat. I will pick it and address to each participant. I ask all of you to keep your microphones off, just to don't have noises during the conference. Thank you for your participation. And without further delay, the first presentation. Welcome to Portugal again, Mrs. Commissioner. You don't need presentation, but whatever. I will say some notes about the European Commission for Cohesion and Reforms. She has a degree in economics from University of Porto and a master and a PhD from University of Reading in UK. She's a professor of economics at the University of Porto and was a former vice governor of Banco Portugal, former Minister of Planning and Environment, and a lot more things to say about it. But it's a friend for the cohesion and deep concern with these issues, and we'd be concerned with the Portuguese position in these matters. So, Mr. Commissioner, the floor is yours. Thank you very much to be here today.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. This time I arrived yesterday. I'm speaking from the Lisbon office of the Commission, and it's a pleasure to be with you. So, dear professors, António, Ramos, Isabel, Salavisa, Pedro, Costa, dear Eduardo, Medeiros, whom I would like to thank in particular for the invitation and for the organization of the conference, and dear Minister Abrunhosa, dear for a long time friend Vasco, Cordeiro, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, as you mentioned, the topic of the conference today is very, very close to my heart. Because since my early days as an economist, not only from an academic point of view, but also working on a regional development agency in Portugal for 13 years. As a minister, I also addressed planning and environment as kindly enough. It was just mentioned. As a member of the European Parliament, and of course, in particular now, as the European Commissioner for Cohesion and Reforms, it's really a topic that followed throughout all my life. But also, I thank you because this debate is extremely timely. At a moment when Europe and member states are preparing their recovery strategies, which will shape our continent and our countries, how they will look in 10 years' time. So I will briefly concentrate in such a rich topic on two main points. First, the importance of thinking the territory, of giving a territorial dimension to economic policy. Second, I will try to touch upon the opportunity to rethink development strategies in the context of the response to the pandemic. Let me start then with the first topic, with the territory. Well, speaking among ourselves, it's a truism, but anyway, I will go through it. It's a truism to say that the economy does not happen in a vacuum. Even the most intangible, so to speak, activities, such as online digital services, have a special impact because of the location of those that they serve or they don't serve, the location of those that produce and distribute the service, and the location where companies decide to pay their taxes. This is just 3 examples. Yet I find it necessary over and over again to recall this aspect. Every policy has a territorial impact, and no policy impacts in the same manner different types of territories. So it's more necessary than ever to go back to the asymmetric territorial impacts of horizontal, so-called neutral policies. Policy makers often ignore this at their own risk, worse, at the risk of economic stagnation and widening territorial disparities. And territorial disparities end up being translated in social disparities and often also political disparities. So it's a breaking up of the society and of the economy in the way it functions. I will recall some key territorial facts. The European Union is known, and I'm quoting a recent international report from the IMF, as to be a convergence machine. I'm quoting. The history of the successive enlargements has been a history of economic convergence between countries. Take for instance, the example of Poland, which was at 50% of the European Union average when it joined, and it is now at 75%. However, convergence is not a linear process and can be halted due to economic crisis or external shocks. Moreover, convergence between countries does not necessarily translate into convergence within countries or between regions. If one looks at the 1,215 NUTS 3 regions, GDP per capita varies, and I'm quoting figures from 2018, which are the most recent ones at this level, from 23% of the European Union average in Silistra, in Bulgaria, to 551% in Wolfsburg, in Germany. That is, Europe's richest region is 24 times richer than Europe's poorest region. There are also enormous divergences in terms of dynamics. Some regions are growing fast, while others are stagnating or on decline. Some relatively poor European Union regions are diverging further away from the EU average. So not only the picture, but the photograph, but the film matters. What is the trend? And some relatively developed regions, particularly in the countries most affected by the financial crisis, are now close to or even below the European Union average, even if some of these regions are located in developed countries. Allow me the example of the country I know the best, as one says in Brussels, so the country of my nationality. GDP per capita in Portugal has converged with the European Union average during the first years of EU membership. Professor Salavisa just mentioned it. But it reached a plateau of around 84–85% in the first decade of this century. With the financial and sovereign crisis, it dropped sharply in 2011 to 78% and stagnated around this new lower level ever since. Internal divergences are still prevailing. Lisbon's GDP, which was 123% of the European average in the year 2000, has declined in the last decade to reach the EU average. But it is still 30% higher than the national average, and it's the double of the GDP per capita in the poorest region of Portugal, Tâmega e Sousa, Alto Tâmega, or Beiras e Serra da Estrela, and these are among the poorest NUTS 3 regions in the country. Addressing these huge divergences, so the double in one region in relation to others, in levels of development, and promoting balanced growth and convergence across EU territories is in fact the role of cohesion policy. Moreover, cohesion policy is essential to ensure a level playing field in an internal market that is inevitably more favorable to the more dynamic regions. So these are two sides of the same coin. The internal market without a strong cohesion policy will just increase inevitably and unstoppably the divergences internal to it. So all regions, in theory, must be able or supported in order to compete in and benefit from the largest single market in the world, and ensure a decent standard of living to their people. But this is not, in fact, and sometimes it is taken as if it was, it's not just about solidarity, but also hard and pure economic logic. Our growth model will be rapidly exhausted if we focus our development in a few regions and a few sectors. In a way, this is the lesson of the last years with the challenges we Europeans are facing in a changing technological, economic, and political world order. Diversifying our sources of growth, and we saw this, it's in a way the reason why the Lisbon GDP dropped, because of the move or of the impact of the financial sector and all the dynamics from the dematerialized economy that bursted with the Lehman Brothers crisis and what followed. But in fact, diversifying our sources of growth and exploiting the advantages of each region, finding new drivers of competitiveness, will increase the resilience of the European economy. The diversity of the European regions is key to European strategic autonomy. So we need this divergence, this difference, which we do not want to be based on closed borders, but on strong competitiveness in an open world economy. So accepting the difference is different from accepting divergence. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a once in a generation opportunity to address these challenges. And this is my second topic. Europe's unprecedented response to the crisis. First, unprecedented in nature. And for the first time, we are using Europe's AAA credit rating to borrow, to go to the financial markets and borrow. Borrow to give grants and to lend, but massively to give grants. Second, unprecedented in unity, because as Europeans, we are answering these questions together in a way we could only have dreamed of in the last crisis. So it's not each country that is facing financial markets to borrow, it's the Commission that will go in unity to the markets, but also unprecedented in scale, because some examples of this, some preliminary examples of borrowing had already existed, but not at all at this scale. We are talking about 750 billion euros for investment and for reforms. So it's about 800 billion in current prices. And the real amount, this is the real amount that will flow into member states. And this adds up. So it's not a substitute, it adds up to the 21-27 multi-annual financial framework. Joining the two instruments, the European Union will have about 2 trillion euros over the last decade for investment and for reforms. Cohesion policy, that now I have the responsibility of representing with a lot of pleasure, but a lot of responsibility, was boosted to 375 billion euros. It's its largest ever. Much has been done already in cohesion policy, and sometimes we are not aware of it, because we had emergency support on the ground, and this happened about 4 or 5 weeks after the start of the pandemic in February 2020. We created an unprecedented change in the regulations of the funds, and within the national envelopes, the money that had not been yet spent or was definitely committed to projects that were rolling out, they could be immediately reprogrammed in order to address the costs of the pandemic. We called it Coronavirus Response Investment Initiative, so it's CRI, the acronym. And this enabled maximum flexibility in the use of the still unspent funds of cohesion. So the regional fund, social fund, and cohesion fund, they could all be reprogrammed in matters of days. More than 22 billion euros from cohesion policy has been in fact mobilized under this CRE initiative to fight pandemic. So it paid for ventilators in Spain, coronavirus lab tests in Italy, to support small and medium companies in Portugal, to support extra work for the hospitals, digital schooling, and all the member states, including Portugal, are benefiting and benefited from this. And this is a long list. So cohesion funds helped to weather out the worst of the pandemic. They have proven their importance as an emergency tool. However, we know that their core mission is not this. It is long-term development. It is time now to refocus and concentrate on the recovery. And in the next few years, Europe will have a firepower, as I mentioned, without precedent. The 2 trillion euros available for the next decade, almost double the 2014-2020 multi-annual budget. Portugal alone will benefit from 24 billion euros of grants from cohesion policy and another 14 billion euros of grants under the Recovery and Resilience Facility. So this amounts to over 3,600 euros of investment for every person in Portugal for the next decade. A further 14 billion euros are available as loans under the Recovery and Resilience Facility, and more under the different European policies that have no pre-allocated, that are not pre-allocated, and but that can have a tremendous impact across Europe. I'm talking about the ones that are not pre-negotiated with member states, but that are managed centrally by the Commission. And I'm talking about Horizon Europe on research and development, InvestEU to support private and public investment, COSME for small and medium companies, Connect Europe facility for infrastructure, Creative Europe, Erasmus, EU for Health, and the list goes on. In short, the European Union and Portugal have a financial firepower that is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make the difference. We have the funds and the instruments to kickstart the recovery and to transform our economies. Portugal was the first country to submit its recovery and resilience plan in Brussels just last week. That is very encouraging. We need reforms and investment to accelerate the recovery and to build a new, greener, more digital economy. These reforms and investments, and here I would like to underline this, must take the territory as the place where development strategies materialize. These reforms and investments need to be territorially sensitive and territorially adapted. The RRP, all nationals RRP, not only the Portuguese one, cannot be territorially blind or they will fail. But as I mentioned, more important even than the RRP in terms of non-repayable funds is cohesion. It is now time also to accelerate the programming of the 2030 programs. In the next few years in Portugal, as in many other European countries, it will be possible to double or even triple for certain years, the next years, the volume of European Union development supporting grants. This will be a challenge to every member state, and even more so in more centralized countries such as Portugal, which steps out as a very, very centralized country in the context of Europe. Why a challenge? Because there must be an intelligent use of exceptional firepower. Development strategies must be adjusted to each territory. And for that, it is essential to understand the territorial dynamics, its assets, capacities, fragilities, and interact with regional and local stakeholders. Only a territorially balanced and diversified economy can be resistant to future crises. Having a clear vision of where we want to go has, furthermore, to be combined with proportionate decentralization and simplification of the delivery system reinforcing regional and local administrative capacities, removing duplications of procedures, and ensuring the necessary synergies between national, public, and private investment and the different European funds. And I conclude, we have a unique opportunity to face a huge challenge that has been haunting us, to recover in a cohesive manner, leaving no region, no citizen behind. Empirical evidence shows that the high-income regions share a couple of characteristics. If you look at the most developed countries all over the world, also in Europe, they have a lower reliance on non-market services. They have a strong push for research and development and innovation. They have investment in human capital and efficient and empowered local and regional institutions. I would add that if you look for any developed country in Europe, you find a multipolar source of dynamic. And if you look at the most backward countries, you have unipolar or duopolar sources of dynamic. Taking the lessons from the past mistakes and successes must be at the focus of the recovery strategy for the coming years. Developing a broader and deeper economy with multiple growth poles across the territory, diversifying the engines of growth and preventing these economies of scale must be central to our agenda. The quality of institutions, this is a very important and intangible but very tangible issue, must be improved, as well as the capacity of public administration all across the territory as well. Investment must concentrate on people and innovative firms in a greener and more digital economy based on each territory's strength. Those of large cities, of course, but also of smaller urban areas, middle-sized towns and rural areas. We must do this in broad partnership with local agents, public and private, mobilizing and building upon knowledge and competencies. I firmly believe that this is possible. This is what territorial cohesion is about. It was very much looking, I was and I am very much looking forward to this debate. I hope we follow it up on other occasions because we need it. Unfortunately, I came to Lisbon because I have a very full agenda, concentrating everything that I could not do before during the more difficult times of pandemic. But so I cannot follow throughout and wait for the last period of debate. My team will go on when I have to leave. But anyway, I'm very interested in answering the questions that you want to put to me now, so that I don't speak and leave. That I hate that. So I'll be listening as far as I can. Then I apologize. I have to leave. I will be briefed, as I mentioned, by my team, and of course, thank you very, very much for this very important discussion and very timely. And I think I've shown clearly enough why it is so timely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for magnificent intervention. Very challenge for us. We are dealing with cohesion problems and cohesion policies. I just have one question, and I'd like to make some notes. The first one, for your presentation, the challenge you address us, because it's a challenge for all of us. How can we deal with competitiveness and cohesion process? How can we treat different what is different and don't lose the competitiveness of the territories and the policies, and don't lose the goals of cohesion policies for Europe? It's one idea I'd like to have some debate. The next one, it becomes from Federação Minha Terra. It's a long question. I tried to short it. The idea is it's a long-term vision for rural areas, and the question from Minha Terra, it's how how the Commission intends in promoting the improving of multi-fund communities-led local development as an instrument for address territorial cohesion, local recovery, achieving the objective of OP5 of cohesion policy. How can we deal at this framework with different boxes of funds between rural funds and cohesion funds in this framework?
Shall I shall I try to answer now? Yeah. Well, on competitiveness and cohesion, there is an underlying debate, so to speak, in countries that are very eager and that need to catch up in terms of development, and debate goes basically like this. Okay, if a country wants to compete globally, it has to concentrate on investing and supporting the areas that are more developed and so are more capable of winning this global competition. And this was the argument prevailing in a lot of countries and also in Portugal for a long time. We have tried it. Since the beginning, I had lots of disagreement with this vision. I remember in the 70s, I had this debate with someone that was very close to me, and we were very good friends, and we also disagreed on this. That was Professor Hernani Lopes, that all of you know. And we were really close and friends, but we disagreed on this. Because, and now we see that if you have a pole of development on which, okay, let's do it only mathematically. If you have a pole of development that covers around, 20 to 30% of the overall population, and then you have 70 to 80% of the population that is lagging behind, you will never have the average speeding up and converging. Also, the idea that, of course, agglomerations of scale end up having spillovers, very positive spillovers on surrounding areas, has failed completely. What it does is brain drain, and sometimes it drains more than brain. It drains those that cannot find a life in the place where they were born, and so we become facing pockets of poverty and pockets of exclusion inside the big cities that really contradict completely all the dynamism that we were expecting to have. Now you ask me, so what is the alternative strategy? We have got to go back to the ground and study the areas, because but we have got, when we go from the central level to the local level, and I speak for the case of Portugal, definitely the kind of the levels that we have that have democratic capacity and financial autonomy are the municipalities. And the municipalities are a very important, a very interesting level, but it's difficult to expect that in such what usually is called a small country, which is a bit absurd in the context of Europe to call Portugal a small country. It's a medium-sized country, but we have around 280 small units that vary a lot in terms of size. So you cannot expect that you can have a development strategy without further work at the level of the municipalities. Of course, they can do, and they are doing miracles in terms of the quality of the urban space, in terms of proximity services. such as treatment of the elderly, children. I mean, all the services of proximity. When you talk about development strategies, if you consider that half of these municipalities, they have less than 14,000 inhabitants. And in the continent, I'm not speaking about the islands because geography matters also here, but in the continent, you have about 10 local authorities that have more or less than 3,000 inhabitants. And then you have 8%, so 24 municipalities that have more than 100,000. And then you have two poles that have, or one pole that has more than 500,000. So these imbalances, they are not the adequate to create at this level the capacity to organize, to have a vision of how you develop a region, how you develop space. So you have to research. And this is an appeal also to the academics to work on the ground with the people, with the municipalities, and to try really to analyze what are, a pure SWOT analysis almost illustrates, but work is needed on the ground. And if you do this, you can have a lot of success, because you can find that probably in each territory, there is a capacity to grow and a capacity to innovate. And of course, the smart specialization, for instance, territorial strategies is an attempt to go and to combine how we can innovate in rural areas or in agricultural products, or in there is no traditional industries and very challenging industries. There are traditional processes and procedures that had no value, and there are industries or activities on which you build on the institutions and on the capabilities, and then you start, you evolve. In my past life, I had lots of debates if it was better to have someone doing textiles, on which the channels of trade and the technology was appropriated by the actors, or to do a very routine, not disqualified, pixel or whatever computer work with the Microsoft. Of course, at first sight, it's better Microsoft. But if in the ground the institutions cannot absorb the technology, and if they just do the usual procedure without no qualification, the outcome of this is that you have a bad intent, that as soon as the labor price goes a little bit higher, it moves away somewhere in the world. So you don't anchor anything. And this reflection needs to be done much more profoundly and much more in an open mind, rather than, and you look at places that were the poorest in Portugal, like Alentejo, and you see that Alqueva is not perfect, but you put 2 or 3 anchoring. Of course, I'm not saying that it is perfect, I think, but then we have to monitor, then we have to control, then we have to control the quality of what we do. But there is a source of development, there is a source of and now it's getting out. So I think we have got, but this capacity to think the ground, to analyze the ground, unfortunately sometimes has been sacrificed, because I should not interfere in my present situation. On the options, we have got to respect the options, but the centralized government, that's what I tried to do, has got to research much more on the ground to try to understand what is happening, and then to try to unlock blocking elements in the development strategy, and to foster others. going back to the previous example, from textiles with the University of Minho, they evolved to the research on materials, and from materials now they are developing, it's one of the Horizon projects, the top projects, they are developing skin, because it evolved, the skin material and new materials. So and they are, I mean, what survived with some roots. And I'm giving this example, but I could give many others in biotechnology or in so for this, and then unfortunately, I mean, the comissões de coordenação, the regional development agencies, which are not, I mean, they were delegations from the central government, but even before the revolution, they were there to study the ground and to make proposals to the central government. They became with time much more concentrating on delivering the funds rather than analyzing how the funds and how the development strategy, in which direction it could go. And it is a pity that now you see that regions like region the north and center, which are the most naturally dynamic, but the most populous in Portugal, they in European figures, they rank among the poorest regions, even they are, I mean, somehow the most naturally active and entrepreneurial in Portugal, and they wait a lot in the country. Algarve is getting out. It's the problem there is diversification and requalification in the strategy. Alentejo needs everything that is being done needs to be controlled, fine-tuned, probably requalified, but it is really stepping up. And the islands, they really show how autonomy can really make a big difference. If you look at Galicia in Spain, that was much poorer than the regional of North Portugal before joining. And if you look at the islands, okay, I mean, it's just a matter of facts, reflection on facts, and we have got to reflect on them. The questions but this would be it's a fascinating question, but I think we should go on discussing it at the European and at national level, because this debate I'm having here, I have with other countries, and I was discussing, for instance, the options in Bulgaria, or because I mean the trend and the challenges are more or less the same. Then for Minha Terra, the question is very big. But in fact, we are trying. I understand that one of the elements is this issue of trying to combine funds in such a way that it doesn't create a nightmare from the promoters. I think it is right. It is right. It's an issue. We are aware of it. The new. I mean, we produce legislation for this new period. It's much better now. I think we introduced a lot of simplification in the management of funds, but also a lot of complexity comes from the national options, because it is this idea that once we are asking this, let's also ask this and this and this, and after a while everything becomes very complex. We are particularly working on a combination of rural areas with cohesion funds, rural funds with cohesion funds. An important element here is to analyze the role of mid-sized towns. I find this very important. Also, the basic conditions for to avoid the digital divide, because we want public administration to be digital. Everything has got to be digital. But then if you have regions in Europe on which you don't have the infrastructure, I mean, they cannot connect. So they are even worse than before, where they had to take a taxi or a bus to go to the. So we really have to think of this, and to think that there must be anyway a mid-sized location, a village or a mid-sized town that provides the basic conditions for a citizen to be an European citizen in terms of accessibility to health, to education, to culture. I mean, it's essential. And my other comment is on the needed combination between regional funds and the European support and national support for innovation, technology, research and development. I think one of the most important actions, that real actions of regional development was the creation in Portugal of these other alternative new universities. So the universities of Évora, of Algarve, of Beira Interior, of Aveiro, Trás-os-Montes, Minho, and I think this created effective new poles, and I think we need to build on the network of polytechnics, on the network of technological centers, so that the innovation goes into the society and in the way people do business, and it is embodied by the companies, and also creating a new breed of investors, and we are seeing already some of these unicorns that Portugal is having. They come exactly from new ways to do business, and not the traditional way of a blue collar becoming an investor, and trying to create its own company by reproducing the same previous model of technology, and having lots of difficulties, but a lot of merit in upgrading its capacity and competence. So I'm sorry, I don't know. Please tell me when I need to shut up, because I'm a bit carried away by these issues, and I see that new questions are popping up. So you tell me what I do with them.
Yeah, just one more question to finish from Professor Isabel Salavisa. He asked you if we should be combine cohesion policies with other policies, such as tax policies and trade policies, to protect developed regions.
Well, I think obviously Isabel has a point there. No question about it. Why I didn't concentrate on that? Because that is a little bit sometimes perceived as being more difficult to manage than what we can do. So I'm a very practical person, and the older I get, the more practical I tend to be, trying to see what we can do with the instruments we have. And what I was trying to suggest is feasible. It's feasible if you that are doing research, if you take an area, take a region, and you make it visible. What are the assets? What are the blocking elements? Well, in my past life, I don't want to pretend that I know how to do it, but I know how difficult it is, because I try to do it. So if you go on the ground and you start researching, and I had to do it in the textile crisis of the 90s in Val do Ave, where it seemed that everything was going to collapse, and bit by bit we understood what was blocking it. So it was still a very dynamic and exporting area, and the trucks, they exported to Europe by truck, but there was no road to get out of it. So the just on time could not work, because they spent almost 4 days trying to get to the border with big these tier I don't know, big trucks that could not even go through the roads, and the local authorities could not solve the problem by themselves, and they were abstracting the water upstream, but because there was not municipal kind of a vision. They were abstracting the water where the other companies were rejecting the water, so they had to pay twice, for inward intake of water, and the other one because Europe was forcing them to clean the waters. And so if you don't do this, I mean, if you don't analyze, if you don't go to the ground, you'll never be able to find what is the value that is there. And I speak about this as I could speak about the historical and the touristic capacity of the aldeias históricas of Beira, of the Douro potential that was lying there, and we didn't have the river, we could not navigate the river, and there is still a lot of work to be done there. Or I could speak of the huge potential of the inland of Algarve. It has magnificent capacity. So what can we do in terms of biotechnology, about what can we do about Alentejo, about the border regions, about the protection of all our border that has been classified, and there is a reason for that, as protected areas. What can we do there with the biotechnology, with the diversity, with protection of biodiversity? What is the value added we can do to it? Yes, but it is true. I mean, but the truth is that trade policy is done at the European level. It's one of the common policies, we know it. What I have been arguing over and over is that when we, and I tell you one thing, that as a member of parliament, I was discussing with the trade commissioner at that time, and so it's not a secret, Peter Mandelson, the British trade commissioner, and I told him, look, we are opening the borders to all the imports of textiles, of footwear, of everything, from China, from Vietnam, and at the same time we are losing this production. And his blunt answer that he did in public was, well, but I mean, life is what it is. So how much do you think Europe can trade of t-shirts, that was his expression, for 1% access to the bank or insurance sector in China? How many t-shirts is that worth? And this is the cruel reality. So of course we have got to be attentive to this. I think this is a new, I mean, Europe is being much more attentive to this now, because now it's not just a pure game between exporters and importers and producers, in which you let the flow go. I mean, Europe took awareness that there must be some control over the strategic elements of these new ecosystems. So now Europe is trying not just to buy vaccines, but to produce vaccines. It's trying to control the digital technology. It's trying to control, and there are some strategic industries, and of course it's the energy and environment industries, but it is also the cancer, combating cancer. It is also the sea, the oceans. What can be the value added? How can we organize this dream? Okay, oceans, but what about it? What do we put in it? Oceans is another mission. Batteries is it's an industry on which Europe wants to keep a minimum control. Multi-conductors, and we have an incredible amount of areas on which Europe is more attentive. So when it comes to negotiating trade, I think what we can do is to show that when we decide to protect cars and to disprotect and to unprotect and to open for another sector, this other sector is located somewhere. But transition must be there. We have done transition in steel. We have done transition we are doing transition now in coal. in coal areas and carbon emitting areas, but we have done it in shipbuilding. So we cannot, this is a complex issue because I think awareness, open discussion is required. Even if we should not, I think Europe cannot close itself and say, okay, let's protect everything. Let's just manage the transition. That's what I've been calling for. Let's manage the transition and not pretend that it doesn't exist. And when transition is there, that it doesn't bring very, very significant costs. And we are trying to do it right now with the Just Transition Fund for the areas that have to do a more dramatic transition procedure. And in Portugal, there are 3 areas that have been proposed. One is Sines, one is Pego, and the other one is the Galp refinery in the middle of Matosinhos. And for this, we can really operate a transition and try to manage the social and the economic impact of the closing of certain activities or the reshaping of certain activities. You mentioned also tax policy. Tax policy is a big issue, a big issue. That's why I mentioned in my speech where they pay taxes. We have done a lot of yes, you can do it at the national level, and it can work, provided you locate, I mean, you control the quality of what you are trying to reach, because transfer pricing inside companies is very normal, as everybody knows. And so you can, what you have at the European level, for instance, is okay, I sometimes I'm a bit shocked because there is such a huge discussion on the level of taxes, if it is 25%, 22, if it is 15, and you disregard that the critical issue is the, I mean, how you calculate the taxable income. Because if you manage to exclude in the taxable income on the basis on which the tax then operates, if you exclude everything on earth, you can end up, you can even put 30% of tax, and you can end up with effective tax of 2% or something like this. So this is an issue that I think with all this when we are talking about own resources, I think it's due time that we address this seriously, because the big companies are just benefiting, and they cannot be blamed for it. They are benefiting. They can be morally or ethically blamed, but in commercial terms, vis-a-vis shareholders, they are doing, I mean, what they are called to do, the managers. And so they transfer, I mean, the income to the places where it is less taxable. And this is a very serious issue, because all we have to have robust national budgets, but more and more the biggest percentage of tax is falling on the shoulders of workers and of small and medium companies that cannot benefit from these things. And so it's becoming very unfair. And so this is a debate on which I welcome that Janet Yellen just mentioned, that we should start thinking of a minimum level of taxation. The Commission is also addressing it. It's proposing new own resources to pay back this borrowing in the markets. And I think this is another area where academic should interfere, should come forward with proposals and really help to solve it. But on top of this, of course, you can have a tax regime. But Isabel, what I think is that let's not look at cohesion as some kind of, okay, we are going to do charity or solidarity. It's in a country cannot develop. Portugal is stuck in a level of income per capita that is poor, and it has been poor for all these, I mean, it is anchored. I avoided the word that is encalhado, but it is like that, because even if the Lisbon area gets 200%, I mean, this weights how much? 20%, 30% effects of the population. When you add the rest, if the rest is stuck also in 67, 65%, it will never. It can never work. Okay, so it's in the national interest that we don't leave 70% of our energy forgotten. It's like if you go for a football game and you leave half of your team sitting on the ground. I mean, they don't play. You are not going to win because you don't have all the capacities engaging in development. And this idea that sitting. That you can understand everything, and I would just add that in recent times we got used, I would say addicted to discussions on development that are not discussions on development. They are discussions on the macro conditions. We have been discussing the public finances exhaustively. And when we are talking about the deficit, the debt, investment, you are spaceless, and you forget that there is a spatial and geographical reference to everything that you mentioned. So I mean, you gave me the floor. I was a bit carried away. I'm sorry to have this kind of open discussion, but it is such an important item, and you are such important stakeholders that I think we should. I could not skip this opportunity to exchange with you, because I think it's really a crucial moment for all the knowledgeable people to come forward and to engage into adequate and sound and mature discussion without avoiding simplified versions of our common future.
Thanks again. Thanks for your time and for sharing all these challenge and ideas with us. We are all concerned with them and committed. We don't have answers for that. Thanks again for your presence here. Now we go to the next analyst, Abrunhosa. It's Minister of Cohesion. She has a PhD in economics for College of Economics of the University of Coimbra, and she's a professor on College of Economics of the University of Coimbra. Was the president of a coordination development mission in Portugal, in the center of Portugal, having management European cohesion funds at the regional level for 9 years. And after this presentation of the commissioner, they have the responsibility to support all this field work in cohesion process. And she knows the regions, she knows the field, she knows the problems, but now she needs to have some answers for all of this. Mr. Minister, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, António. Thank you all. I want to congratulate the organizers of this debate, a very important debate, and it is an honor for me to be here today with you. It is a pleasure for me to share with you and with our commissioner that I especially compliment, and allow me also Professora Isabel Salavisa and all of you. And it is a pleasure to share some ideas and concerns about the importance and of the instruments and policies, but mainly the process for a more cohesive territory in Portugal. It has been said that we are living a challenging moment in history. It has become clear that the economic and social effects of this pandemic can and probably will increase disparities and inequality across and within the member states. And these disparities are causing some people and territories to be left behind. And I think things will worsen when we arrive at the end of this pandemic, if it will have an end. And if Europe wants to emerge stronger from this pandemic, we need more than ever to lay firm foundations for lasting territorial cohesion. And let me share my profound belief. It is not only a question of resources. The process of building and delivering the measures is very, very important. When facing the challenges of the future, we need to demonstrate that the territory counts, but not only on the political words in these meetings, in action in the field, when we deliver the policies and the measures to the people in the ground. This context brings new needs and challenges to cohesion policy. The need for more flexibility. The pandemic brought this very important need of flexibility, namely from actors of all fields, but also the need for innovative solutions and to improve how fast and decisive our reaction is. So time matters and flexibility also matters. And this puts us a pressure, and the normal way of doing this when we have pressure is to centralize, and this is the wrong way. We have, even when we have pressure, we need flexibility and we need to decentralize. So this is, for me, as a politician, very, very important. Europe and each of our member states lost thousands of jobs in all sectors. But such a difficult time also brought new dynamics that under normal conditions would take decades to appear. Small and medium companies in Portugal, they changed their way of doing business. They, namely in what concerns digital transition, they made in a few months what they needed to do in normal ways in several years. So this includes new windows of opportunity for less populated territories. As far as cohesion is concerned, some asymmetries were deepened, but others were overcome. In the worst moments of the pandemic, we saw in Portugal that low density territories meant safety. Now, with the new digital leap, we know they can also mean opportunity. And our cities, until now the center of most dynamics, have new big challenges. Employment is no longer the immutable anchor of our lives and our priorities. When it comes to living conditions, changed in a very profound way. The changes brought by the pandemic mean we cannot look at territory and cohesion instruments in the same way, with the same regulatory approach, or with the same mindset. We must sustain in multi-level approaches. And I saw in one question a very important dimension that I especially give attention, intersectoral policies. So, as I was saying, we must sustain in multi-level approaches new ways of getting policy to territory, giving more choice, it is true, but also more flexibility to adjust to new conditions. And these conditions, they change a lot. We now, in a question of days, the borders were closed, and the world's changed. So we do not know what will happen next month or the month after. So we need flexibility, and we can only have that flexibility if institutions, people of the territory is involved in the design of the policies, and if we approach power, decision-making to the solutions. As a permanent structural policy, cohesion policy is the only one whose scope, capacity, and proximity to citizens make it possible to respond to the three dimensions of Europe's transition: climatic, digital, and demographic. Dear participants, we need to reinforce the territorial dimension of all policies at all levels of government. And we need to improve the instruments and the process we use to work on these goals. We needed to stimulate a just and green recovery, and more than ever, we need to focus on policies for a shared sustainable future for all places and for all people. In this phase of this critical challenge that I ask, can we draw and adapt instruments to territorial contexts so we have a more flexible approach towards regional development? Will we be able to forget the one-size-fits-all model and empower multi-level policy and stakeholders? I believe we can, but it is not an easy task. While debating the next generation of European funds, and at a time when we are drawing the framework of future regional programs, the territory needs to be in the spotlight. So we do believe territory matters. Agendas like sustainability, circular economy, Green Deal, competitiveness, employment, smart cities, smart specialization, well-being or inclusion are only possible with a territorial approach. The level, the density, the capacity of the stakeholders, of the institutions do make a difference. This was the idea behind the creation of the ministry, the Portuguese Ministry for Territorial Cohesion, designed to reinforce the implementation of public policy in the territory, to increase the effectiveness of government's work and the response to current and future challenges. Let me say, for me, this is very important. Reorganizing competences in this new ministry, more than defining new areas of intervention, brings a new way to do place-based policy. And to support that policy on territorial intervention, mobilizing sectors, using an integrated approach and focusing on tailor-made action. And for this, we need to work from the beginning with people, with the municipalities, with the regions, with the associations, with companies, with the academia, from the beginning, when we are designing the policies, when we deliver the policies, when we design the measures and the instruments. No person, no people, no institution, no territory can be forgotten. We must make it happen. And for that, we have to know where we want to go. We must be sure how, when, and who to mobilize. In this context, the Ministry for Territorial Cohesion approved a strategy for territorial cohesion, where we framed our capacity to implement responses to the territorial challenges, social challenges, competitivity challenges, sustainability challenges. And for us, the Territorial Agenda 2030 will make a difference in cohesion policy. treating differently what is different and guaranteeing proximity between resources and decision. This means decentralization. Our statement is made when we choose the brand for our plan, a future for all places. The territorial agenda provides an action-oriented framework to promoting territorial cohesion in Europe, but also a multi-level process to engaging with countries and regional and local authorities in transnational, macro-regional and cross-border levels. The agenda, based on horizontal and vertical coordination and policy making, as well as integrated territorial development, directly contributes to territorial cohesion. It addresses a multi-level governance approach, contributing to subsidiarity. It ensures cooperation and coordination involving cities, civil society, businesses, research and scientific institutions and knowledge centers, as I said before. We need strong institutional and political engagement on this territorial agenda. To succeed, we need to work together, and we need more debates like these. We need more that the people from the territory gets involved. We need to ensure territorial coherence for all different policy, to link all our shared objectives and to guarantee proper ownership by all stakeholders at different territorial levels. Together, we need to make a case for territorial cohesion. We need to explain why places and people matter, and we must achieve truly multi-level governance. National, regional, and local governments, stakeholders, and citizens need to be more than beneficiaries. They must play a vital role in the implementation of the territorial agenda. Territorial cohesion means bringing diversity of territory and opinion into the political decision-making process. We are respecting territories by looking at their specific characteristics, and we are introducing flexibility in the implementation process. Reality changes constantly. That is what this pandemic taught us. So we need to adapt to those changes quickly and effectively. Place and people-based approaches enable us to have the tools, the instruments, the policies, and the means to ensure flexibility. And more flexibility with improve the results for all people and all places means more cohesion. Thank you, and I'm available for your questions. Thank you, António.
Thank you again, and thank you for the intervention. I just one question from the point of view of the presentation of the commissioner and the report and the position you talk us about. Two modes, it's very important. First of all, place-based approach and knowledge from the territory bottom-up approach and flexibility. These two words together bring us the idea of the role of the new presidencies of coordination commissions of development or regional development. And this is an area for your responsibility. How you see the role of the new commissions in this framework of new cohesion policies?
Thank you for the question. So I believe regions need to have more power and autonomy, because it is in the regional level that we better we can do better this the bottom-up approach and have more flexibilities. And for me, what do I mean with flexibility? Having the means, having the solutions for the problems, and that the means and the measures that we adopt are connected to the specific problems. So proximity with the decision making to the beneficiaries is very important. It is also very important that we involve the beneficiaries in the solutions. So first of all, territorial cohesion means that we have to listen, we have to be on the field, we have to know very well the specificities of the problems, of the opportunities of all the regions. We are a median country in an European way, and we need more power in our visions and more autonomy. The regions, the right scale in territorial cohesion, there is it is important to have scale. When we think about the measures to solve our problems, and in our country, I believe regions are the right scale to think about the problems, to think about the measures, to implement the measures, but mainly to involve the stakeholders from the beginning. And in all our regions, the regions, they have a strategy, the regional strategy that was approved by the region, and while developing that strategy, they discussed the strategy, the problems, they made a SWOT analysis with the regions, the stakeholders, and I think even civil society was very committed in this process. But at the end of the day, they should feel that the strategy belongs to the region, but they have to see that the resources and the means, the measures, they fit into that strategy. So we need to be a less centralized government, and we need to have the different sectors of the government to look at the territorial in different dimensions, but have a common base. So the final statement is more autonomy, more power for the regions, because they are the right scale to do this place-based, people-based, bottom-up approach. And they can assure this flexibility because it is very important in this time that everything changes quickly.
Thank you again. Thank you very much for your presence and for sharing the ideas. I step to the next communication. Vasco Cordeiro, lower. It's the first president of the European Committee of Regions and member of Azores Regional Parliament, after have served 2 terms of presidency of the government of Azores and the Autonomous Region of Portugal and UA Outermost Regions. He was being president of Conference of Maritime and Peripheral Regions of Europe from 2004 to 2020. Vasco, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, António, and Madam Commissioner, Madam Minister, all the members of this panel, dear followers of this conference via web. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for having the idea to address this issue of territorial cohesion, trends and policies. I think it's a very, very important discussion between the time, or in this time we have, since the last discussions of the financial framework and multi-annual financial framework and everything that happened before that, and the implementation of the options taken at that time. Let me address. Was what I was asked. Let me address this relationship between territorial cohesion and the Committee of the Regions, and or as we can put it, in cohesion policy as a whole. And I think the first thing we have to consider is that Committee of the Regions and cohesion policy, they start to bond exactly at the birth, because the Maastricht Treaty was the one that created the Committee of the Regions, but also the European cohesion policy, at least as we know it today. Later on, the Lisbon Treaty has had the territorial cohesion to the economic and social cohesion. So the three main topics of cohesion policy. And over the last 25 years, the European Committee of the Region has been following and has paid considerable attention to the enlargement, to the design, to defend cohesion policy. We have some major steps in this step. The developing the concept of territorial cohesion, strengthening the partnership principle and multi-level governance, the cross-border and interregional cooperation, creating local development partnerships, just to name a few of the issues where the Committee of the Regions was directly involved. So, addressing the relationship between the Committee of the Regions and the cohesion policy leads us to more recent times. What has the Committee of the Regions done to preserve and what it has contributed to shape the European Union cohesion policy? So, first of all, we should bear in mind that there were some specific challenges to the cohesion policy in recent times. Shortly after the discussions and the adoption of the last financial framework for the period 2013-2020, there was a clear path of questioning cohesion policy as it is. The objectives of the cohesion policy was, of course, at the table, but cohesion policy was somehow questioned. I remember the public consultation that the European Commission has launched, I think in 2017, was very, very clear about the subtleties in this issue, not addressing directly the importance of the cohesion policy, but mention only the cohesion issues, both in their territorial, economic, and social dimensions. But why has this happened? Well, first of all, we have to confess that mainly from the beneficiaries of the cohesion policy, there were some very critical thoughts, some very sharp thoughts about the cohesion policy. Namely, it was said to be complex. The complexity, the burden of the programs were criticized by the beneficiaries. With the financial crisis, the cohesion policy was said to be too inflexible to help deal with the crisis in a targeted manner. There was the creation of other EU policies that needed to be financed. So cohesion policy was considered as the policy where you can take out money. And also, but last but not least, another challenge for cohesion policy was its role in economic and fiscal policy coordination within the euro area and as part of the European semester. There were more discussions, and I think that there are some more issues, some more facts that brought more pressure to the cohesion policy. The withdrawal of the UK from the European Union put pressure in the financing, in the resources available to finance the cohesion policy. Also, the rising issue, comes from a long time, but climate change as a more urgent need or a more urgent issue to address, and also within the framework of the Green Deal by the European Union. And in this final phase, the cohesion policy was also overshadowed by the discussions about the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and how cohesion policy could contribute to tackle the issues that arise from the pandemic. So we have to consider that with kind of pressure, with this kind of facts that put pressure on the cohesion policy, the discussions about the MFF were not only I think we can use the word compromise, or not only they had a very strong influence, not only because of those facts, but also because the cohesion policy is the largest single investment policy in the EU policy budget. So if you mix all this, you have a situation where I think we can say like that, cohesion policy was at stake, was very clearly on the table, how we can serve other necessities, other priorities than the traditional cohesion policy. So I think we can have three phases in the way the Committee of the Region addressed this kind of discussion. The first phase is from 2015 to mid-2017. There were some very clear indication by the Commission, namely by Commissioners Thyssen and Crețu, that a defense and to put our voices on the defense of the cohesion policy was necessary. I remember a joint letter sent by those commissioners to the cohesion ministers in May 2007, and they suggested, among other things, that the Committee of the Regions should launch a kind of cohesion policy coalition to create a movement of local actors in defense of the cohesion policy. So as far as 2017 and before that, we can see there is a very clear feeling that cohesion policy should be defended. There is something happening about cohesion policy that must be defended. So the Committee of the Region enters in this discussion, and this brings us to the second phase, from mid-2017 to mid-2018. This is where the debate started with the presentation of initial reform proposals for the future shape of cohesion policy. So the Committee of the Regions was the first EU body to present its vision, for the future of cohesion policy. This was very shortly before the Cohesion Forum in May 2017. So what were the issues, the main issues that we put forward in this presentation? Well, all regions should benefit from the cohesion policy. So the three categories of regions, the more developed, the transition, and less developed regions should therefore be maintained. The cohesion policy should be flexible in the funding period that came ahead, without any kind of compromising the orientation or the planning certainty of this framework, of these financial programs, of these multi-annual programs for regional and local authorities. And so it was not only a question of defending the cohesion policy as a pillar of fulfilling one of the main objectives of the European Union, the territorial, economic, and social cohesion, but also a challenge to have it duly funded. So it's at this time that the idea of a coalition takes form. The Cohesion Alliance was officially launched during the European Week of Regions and Cities in November 2017, and it was a joint initiative put forward by the Committee of the Regions and other associations like the Association of European Regions, the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, the Conference of Peripheral and Maritime Regions of Europe, the Conference of European Regional Parliaments, Eurocities, the Association of European Border Regions. So the Cohesion Alliance was this idea, remember the letter of Commissioners Thyssen and Crețu, to create a movement to defend not only the cohesion policy, but to have it duly funded in the discussions that were at the time taken to in the context of the multi-annual financial framework. So all this tended to generate a strong movement of support of the cohesion policy after 2020. And I think it influenced the Commission's further reflection on the future regulation of the funds. The Commission had several options that affected cohesion policy. And for the first time in its history, as we can remember, there was a clear rejection by the Committee of the Regions of the Commission's proposal to amend the Common Provisions Regulation as regards the use of the performance reserve to support structural reforms in the member states. So, and the Committee of the Regions was very, very serious about that. It also announced that it was ready to make full use of its right to bring action against the legislative act before the Court of Justice of the European Union. So at the same time, there was this discussions and steps forward, steps back in the discussions between the Commission and also the European Commission and also the Committee of the Regions. So the Commission asked at this time the Committee of the Regions to help gather the widest possible involvement of local and regional authorities in the consultation about the future of the cohesion policy. The same one that I referred previously that indicated this dangers, let me put it this way, to the cohesion policy. Well, there was a third phase from mid-2018 to March 2021. And this was where the Commission had presented the positions presented its proposals, the positions of European Parliament and the Committee of the Regions were at the same level, were convergent. on many different issues. So when the negotiations started in 2019, started again, I mean, in 2019, they were influenced by a series of events, a series of steps taken forward by the Committee of the Regions that took place in the meantime, or that were supposed to take place in a very short period. So in July 2019, the newly elected Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced the creation of an additional Just Transition Fund. This was already addressed here. So shortly afterwards, the coronavirus pandemic required swift and bold action to respond to emergencies in a lot of regions in Europe. And so the European Committee of the Regions supported the proposals of the European Commission through communications to the European Parliament and the Council in April 2020 set up a special COVID-19 exchange platform to support in particular the exchange of experiences between regions. So in 27 May 2020, the European Commission proposed the euro 750 billion reconstruction plan. So the Cohesion Alliance, as the issue developed and as the issue gathered support, the Cohesion Alliance felt the need to redirect their goal and to redirect their objectives. So they, the alliance that in November last year gathered more than 14,000 supporters had put their emphasis in the implementation and the necessary synergies between the different instruments. This is the main goal of the Cohesion Alliance right now. So it is, we can ask what, but in all that, what was the impact? How we can evaluate the impact of the Committee of the Regions' work and the developments of the cohesion policy? Well, I think it's possible to do that in the way, in the agreements, analyzing the agreements reached by the European Parliament and the Council. For example, the reference to integrated strategies for demographic change in the framework regulation is an exact text proposed in the Committee of the Regions opinion. And there are numerous other indirect impacts on EU policies, either in conjunction with others or as a result of the core activities. So we can name the taking greater account of the diversity of circumstances at local and regional level in the context of the European semester analysis, the increased understanding of the need for more multi-level governance and partnership in the implementation of EU policies, and I'll get back to this later, the need to promote regional development strategies, the role of the local and regional level in achieving European objectives such as climate change. So I think we can have three conclusions from this relationship between the Committee of the Regions and the cohesion policy. So first of all, and I think it's very important, is we have to bear in mind that cohesion policy is not unquestionable. It's not safe. It's not taken for granted. It's not established as one of the core policies of the European Union. It should be defended. And the best way to defend is to use it right and to use it good and to demonstrate its results to the development of regions. Second, territorial cohesion should not only be a concern of cohesion policy, but also of other policies. Let me give you a concrete example that it's happening right now. CAP reform, Common Agriculture Policy reform. We are discussing right now, what is this at the discussion, at the table right now in the trilogues, is to eliminate the possibility of regions having the power to manage, namely the second pillar, rural development of the common agriculture policy. So I think the question is inevitable. How can you explain that the same European Commission that at the same time commends the cohesion policy withdraws region from the management power of such an important policy for local and regional communities like the common agriculture policy? I cannot understand this. I think this is a huge mistake. I understand the reasons why we should simplify, we should put, everything is understandable. But in the common agriculture policy, with the weight it has in rural communities, to eliminate the possibility of regions to manage, namely the second pillar, rural development, to define, to establish goals for their programs, this is a huge mistake we are making. And the third conclusion is the Committee of the Regions has its power, not the power of the Committee of the Region does not arise from its competences. It's a consultative body. It not arises from the money he manages. It does not manages money. It comes from the example of the members of the Committee of the Regions, from local and regional authorities. And it comes from the example that those communities, those authorities can put forward to see this is how we can make Europe works to the citizens at the basic level of the impact of European policies. This is where, in my opinion, where the Committee of the Regions power comes from, for the example, for the connection it has with the citizens and the authorities that serve in a more direct and immediate way those citizens. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share with you these ideas about the Committee of the Regions and the cohesion policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for very clear presenting and very clear point of view of the debates of cohesion policies. Is in my name, thank you for rescue the cohesion policy for all this regulatory process. I just have one question because the time is going by. And the question is connecting to this third conclusion you have. Now we have growing and we are start to drawing the instruments for political cohesion process. How can the Committee of Regions and its members, because the power is in the members of the committee, how can they help the management authorities and countries to draw better instruments for implementing the process?
Well, thank you so much for the question. Two ideas. First, the Committee of the Regions as an EU institution has the possibility and should follow the implementation of the major policies and the fulfillment, the achievements of the major goals of the European policy. But also it can have a contribution at two levels, not only addressing the main concerns of local and regional authorities in that implementation, but also as a huge bank, a huge form of synergy between best practices, examples, between connecting the basic level of governance, regional and local governance across Europe. So what I would like to stress in conclusion is well, we can have a lot of considerations about the role, the powers of the competencies of the Committee of the Regions, but its role as the voice, the representative of local and regional authorities, and the fact that one of the major goals of the European Union, as enshrined in the treaties, namely in the Lisbon treaties, the territorial cohesion, lays on the work of these local and regional authorities, give the Committee of the Regions a lot of possibilities, a huge horizon of intervention to be vigilant, to ask, well, to demand the accountability of the other institutions' work in what's related with this objective. So it's not finished with the defense of the cohesion policy. It's not finished with the defense of a duly funded cohesion policy. Well, we're still playing, we're still in the game to defend local and regional communities across Europe. That means territorial cohesion.
Thank you, Vasco. It's not the end, it's the beginning. Thank you very much. Now we step to the other communication. Eduardo Medeiros is the geography professor and integrated researcher at Lisbon University Institute. He has a PhD in geography. In his research interests are European cohesion policies, territorial cohesion, territorial impact assessment, territorial cooperation, and territorial development. So, Eduardo, thank you very much for all of these organizations. Floor is yours.
Thank you, António. I'd like to thank, of course, my institution for supporting this event, and also the speakers and, of course, the participants. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we cannot be physically together, but hopefully next year we can have this opportunity, or some other year. Well, as can be seen from the title of my presentation, I will speak about these territorial cohesion trends in Portugal and in Europe. But before this discussion, I think there is a need to differentiate these policy concepts that are used in EU and national entities, which is growth, development, and cohesion. So a good entry point for this discussion is the analysis of the territorial development concept, and its main dimensions, pillars, and scales. So unlike this mainstream economic development concept, which is widely used, which only has one analytic dimension, economy, territorial development requires a multidimensional analysis. It's far more difficult to analyze, which includes not only economic competitiveness and the need for social cohesion, but also environmental sustainability and territorial governance and spatial planning. So several people often ask me what's the difference between territorial and regional development. Well, in very simple terms, one can state that regional development is territorial development at the regional level, like urban development is territorial development at the regional level. But more importantly, development requires more than growth. So if you understand growth as, in a simple form, as the creation of wealth, so development is more than this. It requires also the retention of wealth on territories, on regions, on cities, and its relative distribution. And this is the notion of cohesion, which is very important. So the key message here is that public policies, in my opinion, should ultimately be about promoting development and cohesion and not necessarily growth. Why? Because there can be growth without development. If the wealth is not retained in a certain territory, if it's concentrated only in a few places. So this rationale justifies why the fathers of the European cohesion call it appropriately cohesion policy and not growth or investment policy. That is a discourse that has permeated EU and national entities in past years. So what is the difference between development and cohesion? So why shouldn't we have a cohesion policy and not a development policy? Well, because let's take this example, you can have a country where you have regions with different levels of development. You have a leading region, for instance, and a lagging region. And ideally, you will, for having cohesion, you need to have a strong development trend in certain indicators on the lagging region. So you can have development, but you can not achieve territorial cohesion. So that is why cohesion is so important. So the key conclusion here, and this is actually the case from the studies that I've done in countries like Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Finland, Norway, this is always the case. You have the contribution of cohesion policy has been fundamental and crucial and critical to development processes in all regions. But at the national level, there's not a single case that I've studied that territorial cohesion at the national level was achieved. So the key conclusion here is that you cannot just promote territorial cohesion policies, such as cohesion policy. It needs to provide evidence. There is a need for evidence, as other speakers spoke, on territorial cohesion trends in order to verify the success or not of these policies, of these investments. So, but for this, there is a need to define what is territorial cohesion. And I always say there won't be a common agreed definition of territorial cohesion, but I always say, okay, let's identify what are the main dimensions and relative components. And after that, we select indicators and we measure it. So in this regard, and I created this, what I call the STAR of territorial cohesion model in 2003, which according to this model, the definition of territorial cohesion is a process of promoting a more cohesive and balanced territory, which supports socioeconomic territorial imbalances, promotes environmental sustainability, reinforces the improvement of territorial cooperation and governance processes, and reinforces and establishes a more polycentric and urban system. So, of course, the measure of territorial cohesion needs comparable indicators in a balanced way from all these dimensions and respective components. This is easier said than done. I still remember in 2003, I started to do this exercise to measure territorial cohesion in Portuguese NUTS 3. I had to go to national DGs and acquire some diskettes. I don't know if anybody still remembers about this, that had some statistics, because there was not statisticals, for instance, related to renewable energy production in Portuguese regions in the national statistics. They still, I think, don't exist. So for this presentation, I collected a lot of data, fresh and new data from EU statistical sources and Portuguese statistical sources to produce this aggregated territorial cohesion index, both for the EU and Portugal, to cover the past decade from 2010 to 2020. The methodology used was the one used by the United Nations to create the Human Development Index, so it's available online. So as can be seen, for the EU, I produced a very simplified territorial cohesion index with one indicator per dimension. I always use twice as much indicators for the socioeconomic development dimension because it incorporates two significant components, which is the economy and the society. So I use data from Eurostat, ESPON, which is the European Spatial Observatory Network, the European Commission Joint Research Center databases, which are very complete, but was very difficult to find comparable indicators at NUTS 2. At NUTS 3 is almost impossible. That can be comparable and that can focus on all these dimensions. Even so, it was possible to find an aggregated index for EU governance, which is produced by a university. Unfortunately, there was no aggregated index for polycentrism. In 2004, the ESPON produced a report 1.1.1 from Nordregio, which produced this polycentric index was for the NUTS 1 in Europe, but was never updated. And I also know that in the sixth cohesion report, the Commission produced an aggregated index on human development in Europe for NUTS 2, but was never updated. I never saw it updated. I didn't see it in the seventh cohesion report. So there is actually a need, and this is my suggestion to the European Commission, is that it enables financially the Eurostat to produce more territorial statistics to produce a territorial cohesion index at EU NUTS 2 based on these proposed 4 dimensions or others, and that it produces on an annual basis this aggregated index is related to socioeconomic cohesion, to territorial governance, to polycentrism, and to environmental sustainability, so that it is possible that to measure the territorial cohesion trends in a comparable way, in a more detailed way than the one that I'm done here. But the question is there any correlation between these scores for territorial cohesion and the EU cohesion investments? Well, if you compare the territorial cohesion trends in the past decade, based on the indicators that I used, and the data that is available on the databases from the European Commission that shows the distribution per capita of the EU funding since 2007 to present day, it doesn't seem to have a lot of correlation. Well, of course, using correlation to try to answer this question is difficult because we all know that policies do not act in isolation. So this correlation is not a simple exercise. One requires to make a more detailed project analysis of cohesion policy implementation, the collection of qualitative and quantitative elements to assess the territorial impacts of cohesion policy and its contribution to territorial cohesion. I actually have done this for 3 countries, Portugal, Spain, and Sweden, but I had to use territorial impact assessment, a TIA, a model which is called Target TIA to make this, and it takes far more time than just a simple correlation, but it will answer the question. But it's curious to see that the data that shows the EU investments since 2007 in the units 2 does not seem to correlate very well with the obtained territorial cohesion indexes. Indeed, the second map kind of destroys this catch-up policy rationale that all regions matters, as it is possible to see that EU cohesion policies tend to concentrate the bulk of their investment on lagging regions, so they matter. The question is it possible to detail this territorial cohesion index even further? It is possible, but if one looks at the national statistics, one needs to go to the national statistics and use, for instance, the data for the NUTS 3 level. But they, of course, might not be comparable between countries as they might not use similar indicators. So we need to take one country at a time, and I make this exercise for Portugal. And this time it was not just one indicator per dimension, but 2, 4 in the case of the socioeconomic cohesion, because these 2 components of society and economy are very important. And the results were probably not what I would like as a Portuguese, because you can see that even since 2010 to 2020, based on the indicators I used, and this is always, dependent on the indicators, some of the Portuguese leading regions, such as Lisbon metropolitan area, had a higher territorial cohesion scores than lagging regions that the Commissioner Elisa Ferreira already identified that are located here in the Açores. This means that according to the selected indicators, there is a need to continue a continuation of unwanted territorial exclusion vis-a-vis the wanted territorial cohesion trends. And I mean a continuation because I've done these studies of measuring territorial cohesion in Portugal using data since the early 1990s, and the results are not much different from this. The final question is, once again, I want to compare what is the territorial cohesion trends before the final question and the investments of the Portugal 2020 policy framework, which is the name given to the EU cohesion policy investments for the 2014 to 2020 period per NUTS 3. So we can see here, with the exception of the Açores, which actually received quite a lot of money per capita, the bulk of the investment was allocated to leading which is the two metropolitan areas of Lisbon and Porto, rather than lagging regions. So this is exactly opposite rationale that I would expect my country to do to implement territorial cohesion policies. You know, people might tell me, okay, this is where people are located and activities are located, that they need to receive more money. Well, but if we want to have this logic, then we shouldn't pursue territorial cohesion policies. We shouldn't have a territorial cohesion ministry as we have. So in my opinion, this should be ratified. But the final question is territorial cohesion really possible? Because all the studies that have made on territorial cohesion, measuring territorial cohesion in European countries, show always the same results. You know, cohesion policy has been important to promote development in all regions. It has, in one way or the other, maybe more in the leading regions than others. But at the national level, there's no trends of territorial cohesion. It's the opposite, it's territorial exclusion. But I think that from a theoretical point of view, it is possible. One possible way of achieving this from a theoretical point of view is based on the ideas that were already advanced by the Commissioner Elisa Ferreira of multiple poles, multiple dynamics, and the rationale that the Minister of Territorial Cohesion said that the region is the best place to act when it comes to implement development policies. So, and this rationale is called the Territorial Cohesion Cities, which is based on the idea that the EU funding should be mostly concentrated, not in already leading regions, but on medium towns, something that was already spoken about also by another speaker, on medium towns that are engines of development in these lagging regions. But of course, one needs to understand, as Commissioner Elisa spoke about, the region to make these smart investments. Indeed, what we have witnessed in past decades is a widespread distribution of cohesion policy to all places. You know, every municipality receives its swimming pool, its sports pavilion, so they can't complain because they are receiving this funding. I'm not saying that these inhabitants in these lagging regions should not have their swimming pool or other amenities. Of course, they are entitled to that. What I'm saying is that this policy rationale of spreading all this funding without a criteria has failed to achieve territorial cohesion policy goals. It has. This is not just the case of Portugal, it's everywhere. As I propose this novel and more theoretical, effective strategic rationale to implement cohesion policy, which favors a few regional development engines, which is called the Territorial Cohesion Cities rationale. So I end my presentation. António.
Thank you. Thanks, Edward. Thank you very much for your presentation and for your model. I think we're going to have and bring a lot of debate. We don't have yet questions for the audience, but I'd like to put some ideas. You talk about an indicator that can measure the cohesion process in the field. I don't know if the stress you've done with the per capita investment is the right one to look if your model is quite a proxy to the reality, because the per capita it brings a lot of discussion around it. But I think, like your proposal, Europe should have an indicator, a regular indicator for helping and for support this multi-level discussion we have here today. How can we address multi-level responsibilities and multi-level instruments for cohesion policy if we don't have capacity to measure quite and make decisions about the indicators we have? So what kind of solution can we propose to Eurostat or to DG Regio to help us to have a better instrument? Even so, we see every day a commission and all the bodies from the commission try to show us new platforms of information of database in open database to use it for transparency of the process. Thank you.
Okay, if I may, it is a big challenge to get indicators in the Eurostat that are comparable, because to measure territorial cohesion is quite a complex exercise, because you need to have comparable indicators between two periods of time. And then you can't just use economic indicators, because territorial, as you know, and you're a geographer, it's not just about economy. You need to include everything. You need to include social indicators, environmental indicators, and then you have spatial planning indicators that, you know, where you can see the trends in accessibility, for instance, in polycentrism. And then you start to have some indicators on governance. So my challenge here, and I've been participating in quite several meetings within the Commission, even the Committee of the Regions. And these persons from Eurostat, represented from Eurostat, they're always answering the same way. We're always asking them data to better understand, for instance, cross-border cooperation, border regions, and they always say we don't have budget. So my challenge and the Commission is, if they still have the money, because that's always their response, that they don't produce more statistics because they don't have budget to do it. My challenge is give more money, and this is a challenge for Elisa to discuss this within the Commission. We need better statistics. We can't have just a territorial cohesion policy if we can't measure it. We can't just, the goal is not, this is not a growth policy or investment policy when you get GDP and we see is working or not. No, this cohesion is more than this. And this is very important. So my challenge is to join forces with ESPON, which is European Observatory Network. They have the knowledge to produce this polycentrism index, which they include data from connectivity, from accessibility and other indicators. They've done it before in 2004. They never updated this. The challenge is to go to Eurostat and create these aggregated indexes for all these dimensions that are agreed that are important to measure territorial cohesion, and then create an annual aggregated index from all these indexes that is able to give an answer to the Commission if it's working or not, at least for NUTS 2, because I know NUTS 3, it's very, very complicated, but the NUTS 2, it's possible to do it. And if we go to the national statistics, we actually find data. It means there's not a very good collaboration between national statistics and Eurostat. Because if you go to Eurostat and you see statistics on social statistics, we see a lot of gaps in regions. We have data for Dutch regions, for German regions, for Portuguese, it actually works very well. But then we go to Bulgaria, to Romania, and we see these gaps. So it's impossible to make this study if we have a lot of holes in the statistics, which is a common trend in the data that is present now in Eurostat. The best statistics that I saw is actually the ones that are produced by the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. These are actually all complete. They don't have any holes there. I know there is some proxies they have to have, but Eurostat is not doing the work, in my opinion, to help the Commission to measure and to evaluate, because you cannot just implement policies, you need to evaluate them. And to evaluate them, you need some data.
Thank you, Edward. Maybe it's a new recommendation for Cohesion Alliance to Committee of Regions to help us to find good data for this process.
May I get in again, or?
Yes.
Yeah, I came back. I was out, but I came back, and I take good note. Just to tell you that I take good note, but I think we have got to have more content, more academic and technical content on which variables are we looking for, what would be the elements. And I think this was the initial question also from Professor António Ramos was, okay, but what about the what would be the adding up indicators that would help us to address this in a better way. But anyway, the general trend and general ideas, I think they were very clearly stated, even with the indicators that you have. We can refine the concept, but that's not the what's impeding us. making better use of the instruments that we have. And that's what the discussion nowadays at this precise historical moment is looking at, and so probably, I mean, I think you finished with a vision that was very, very interesting, but probably this is the time to go deeper into what are we talking about. I mean, how can we, because also, I mean, if you think of a big investment such as a dam, a big dam, or a big investment in a port of Sines, or if you think of a big investment like the metros in the capitals, then you completely imbalance the figures. So do we miss funds, or do we miss strategy for the funds so that they are used in the most adequate way? And adding, so I think we have got to shift from quantitative analysis into qualitative analysis, and for this we have got to go to the ground and to the territories, and of course you already hinted at it with these middle-sized polls, but these middle-sized polls again may be necessary, not sufficient conditions. Probably we have to go even deeper and to see how the smart specialization concept materializes on the ground, and what are in fact I mean, conditions for growth in different areas. So yes, I take good note. I'll try to be in touch to follow up on this. That's why I'm listening. It's trying to I mean, to do something about it. But having said this, I don't think this can be seen as an impediment, because I also, I mean, I had certain debates. If you do 1 kilometer of a highway, and that's incredibly costly, whereas, and then you cannot compare that cost with the cost, for instance, of training or education. So there is also a lot of misleading, and I think we have got to tackle this when we just look at amounts. But for time being, we have GDP per capita and amounts, okay. So yes, and also because when you have a very backward regions and the eastern areas, I mean, that you showed in the chart. They are very backward, so they need basic infrastructure. So with basic infrastructure, you spend a lot. Then as you are moving into the middle income catching up area, then you move from infrastructures to real immaterial but real value added kind of options. Things become much more sophisticated. Then and it moves definitely from quantity into quality, and there is where we lag behind, and then the trend is, okay, let's multiply the investments, because at the very, very small level, and I go back to my argument, you cannot devise a strategy, a regional, sustainable, ecological, innovative strategy, because you need another scale. And I think it was the minister that was addressing it, the scale. Okay, I take good note. I'll be in touch, but I think we have got really to fine tune the concept so that we can go into giving the appropriate answers, but not thinking that if you get those answers, we solve the problem. That's two different dimensions. Probably we write a better paper, but the issue, I mean, our everyday life is there. So we have got also to help to make the best use of this historical opportunity, I think.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Commissioner. Thank you, Eduardo. Now we give the floor to Elisa Vilares. It's the head of Division of Territorial Development and Urban Policy at the Director General of Territory, Direction General for the Territory, and the Portuguese representative at Network of Territorial Cohesion Contact Points. She's an chief architect and public officer with advanced studies in public management. And she have a big responsibility today because all the communications, all the debate is around territory, and the new agenda for 2030. It's very important, and very important the brand of this agenda. I think it's very point choice for the title of the agenda, A Future for All Places. And Elisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, António. And first, let me start by expressing the appreciation for the organizers, for you in particular, António Ramos, and also for Eduardo Medeiros, for this kind invitation and also for this event to bring the issues of territorial cohesion and territorial agenda on debate and highlighted by such knowledgeable and preeminent actors here. It's my honor. And this has been already quite a debate. Just allow me, before entering into the presentation, just to highlight this odd coincidence of having Elisa, Anna, and myself calling Anna Elisa, three women sharing names. And that fact of names, that oddity, being the only oddity that we can expect in an Europe that pursues and must always pursue gender equality. But now for the greater issue of equality among places, of equality of opportunities and access, regardless of where you live, which would be in a nutshell, in a very brief nutshell, what territorial cohesion is all about. And I'm bringing to you essentially because we have all been discussing territorial cohesion and the territorial agenda. This is a presentation essentially on the territorial agenda for you all. I don't think I will have more new words than have already been said here, because clearly there is a clear match between all the discussions that we had and what is reflected in the territorial agenda. So just a brief note on context of what is the Territorial Agenda 2030 and where did it came. It came from over 20 years of intergovernmental cooperation on territorial cohesion, from its beginnings of the European Spatial Development Strategy in 1999, up until the first Territorial Agenda for the EU in 2007. I think we Portuguese might remember it quite right, because it was during the German presidency before our own, and it was included in the debate that led also to the Lisbon Treaty. And also during that time, it was our first national spatial planning policy program adopted in that year, in 2007. So there was a happy coincidence in that year of debating territorial cohesion. From then on, we had a new version in 2011, the Territorial Agenda 2020, to match it with the EU priorities, and now we have the Territorial Agenda 2030. Why do we have now this new version for the Territorial Agenda and this need for revision? And I think the discussions that we had today pretty much respond to that issue. Why is the territorial agenda so much needed? Because we are facing tremendous challenges, because territorial cohesion is at risk of, and the trends are not the most fortunate, should I say. And there are, and as Eduardo Medeiros has pointed out, we have seen places and people drifting apart by every emergency, by every urgency that we have, economic crisis, the COVID situation now, we see that there are people and places being left behind. But we also have tremendous challenges that we need to face, such as climate change, which poses a tremendous challenge to territorial cohesion and to territorial development. And the demographic and society imbalances, the European Union as a whole is shrinking, its population is shrinking, and that produces significant challenges. We have already heard here the issues of small and medium-sized cities and towns, especially in lagging regions, in regions which are less populated, and this is a serious matter for territorial cohesion, and particularly addressed within the territorial agenda. But other issues that we've seen, not just the climate change itself, but the whole biodiversity loss, the big challenge that we are facing for the future. In terms of our natural resources. So we are faced with a challenge, not just in terms of territorial cohesion per se, but how it interlinks with the main challenges that our places are facing, these main challenges that do require a transition. So we can take a negative approach on this, or we can take a positive approach on this to say, well, yes, there are things we can do, there are actions we can take on this. And this is where the territorial agenda comes as a main framework for territorial cohesion, and where actions, the needed actions, are expressed here. But it essentially puts out a positive approach in how can we actually deliver this. And as you'll see, it matches essentially a lot of the solutions that have been brought today by several key players. So essentially, the territorial agenda identifies actions in those challenges that I mentioned, and sets two priorities: a just Europe and a green Europe. In terms of a just Europe, and this is this main objective, a just Europe that offers the perspective for all places and people, we have three main priorities. And as you'll see, they are pretty much focused on these place-based integrated approaches, and on the functional regions and the cross-border approaches. And also one key message that I have to echo, because I've already heard it today, is the message that the diversity of Europe should be an asset. That does not mean, I think I'll quote the Minister Abrunhosa on this, that does not mean we accept the divergency, but we accept and we foster this diversity as an asset for the development of each place. The other objective is the Green Europe. And again, I'll echo a lot of the concerns and a lot of the perspectives that have been said here. And it's quite fortunate that the territorial agenda does match the concerns by the main stakeholders here present. That we need to have in each place the better ecological livelihood, and the climate neutral, resilient towns, cities, and regions. This is a quest for every scale, and this is a quest for every place. Circular economy needs to be addressed on regional and local levels as an articulation of where this development could be articulated with the global embeddedness. And finally, and last but not least, and very important, as already been said, the question for connections. And the connections are not digital. We all know that digital does make wonders. We have seen this fast transition of all of us during this COVID pandemics using digital. And it is very much necessary, but also the physical condition, the physical connections. Digital and physical connections are absolutely necessary for places to have a future and to be embedded and to have those equal opportunities for people who live there, to have the same opportunities and access both to services and to the opportunities of the open market. And this is a message which, again, I repeat a lot of what has been said here. The territorial agenda is not, the territorial agenda was adopted by the ministries responsible for territorial cohesion, but is to be implemented by every actor at every level. Every player, every actor can take action in the context of our regular mandates. National level, regional and local level, intergovernmental cooperation, cross-border cooperation. This is the actions that the territorial agenda identifies that needs to be taken by all of us, and this is a matter of all of us at European, national, regional and local level. And finally, what does the territorial agenda brings? And again, I'll echo some issues that have been already raised here. And this is essentially the pack of arguments for the territorial agenda and the territorialization of policies. First off, the need to have the strategic territorial focus, the idea that the spatial lens provides an adequate process to combine the complexity, to combine how these complex challenges are intertwined specifically in each place. So this spatial lens, the knowledge that's invested in here, and the knowledge that comes from the ground, as Elisa Ferreira has said, but also from all sectors, to bring within this spatial lens the idea that we can develop integrated approaches that are knowledgeable and with the participation of all levels. The second is that the territorial approaches, these place-based approaches, these multi-sectorial approaches, they strengthen the structures and cultures of governance, and they create better governance, not just for now, but for the future. And if we are truly committed into this future, and truly committed into building that in a sustainable manner, these territorial approaches and this logic of multi-level approaches, both cross-border and through levels, are absolutely key for delivering better governance, not just now, but into the future. This is the development, I have to say, from the Territorial Agenda 2000 that came in 2007 from the Portuguese experience. As I said to you, we have our National Spatial Planning Policy Program adopted by Act of Parliament in 2007, and now has been revised. And the jump that we have made from that spatial strategic focus at national level, really thinking the territory in terms of territorial cohesion, up until this moment, is that we really need to strengthen and invest in governance mechanisms, in governance in a multi-sectorial dialogue, and of course that this strategic focus of national level is incomplete without the regional approaches, as already been mentioned here. The importance of breaking silos. And again, I bring this place-based approach in this sense. We have complex challenges. These are not sectorial challenges. They cannot be approached singly by a sectorial approach. We need to bring more territorial thinking into sectors. And we need to have cross-sectorial approaches into big challenges. They cannot be just circular economy, for instance, not just a challenge of environment, of course, as rural development is not just a challenge of one sector. And even now we have different sectors that were not originally foreseen in some of these thematic priorities, should I say, into some of these priorities, and need to be involved for the development of each place in their specificities, in the way each of these complex challenges coalesce in this territory, both their specific problems and both their specific potentialities. And finally, innovation and experimentation, that's for sure. We need to have more experimental approaches, and we need to have them co-designed with the community, but also in terms of implementation with the community. We need to accelerate, not just to fasten the approach, but we need to accelerate the learning process of policies. We experiment, we learn. That those experiments and those innovations, they might fail because they are experiments and innovations, but we learn to learn from that process and develop and accelerate the policy cycle learning process. So one final issue that I would like to bring to you is because we have the issue. I've been during this Portuguese presidency trying to communicate and to support and develop communication toolkits for every stakeholder, and essentially one of the key issues when it comes to communicating the territorial agenda is about translating. How do we translate this document, which is a strategic document? You know, it's it may seem sort of esoteric for local actors. How do we actually translate this in a way that is understandable on a daily basis to everyone? And so essentially this is our effort at national level, but we have a very good support for this, because the territorial agenda has also brought 6 pilot actions. There are other examples that you could see on the website to take inspiration, but these 6 pilot actions that are being promoted by different coalitions, should I say, or partnerships of member states, European organizations, including here the Commission, ESPON, and others, but also between member states and their local and regional partners to test, demonstrate the territorial agenda in practice. So these are 6 pilot actions that are going on with different approaches. You'll see some, and I invite you to look into the website of the territorialagenda.eu, and for sure there will be a lot of opportunities for you to see and to talk about these specific pilot actions, but they are the territorial agenda put in practice, and you'll see in them quite relevant approaches and interesting approaches to some of these challenges. I will not designate each one of them. They have different natures, but they are very interesting. Also, if you have any questions about them, and of course about the territorial agenda, territorial cohesion, I'm most than happy to respond. Thank you, and I'll stop my sharing. I think, let me just get this final slide. You'll have the website of the territorialagenda.eu to explore, and please do.
Thank you, Elisa. Thank you very much for your presentation. I don't resist to ask you how it is our pilot action promoted from Portugal. What is the point of this pilot action, and who have the courage to come with us, because it's a very important pilot action, and it's very important for all of us to know a little more about it and mobilize all the strongest actors we find in Europe for that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'll try to be brief on that pilot action. The pilot action, essentially at national level, we are exploring the approach. Essentially, itself, it's a pilot. It's quite interesting because itself it's a pilot action for us, Portugal. So we are exploring, as I think you are all aware, we have devastating forest fires in 2017. We have all acknowledge collectively that our forest areas are very vulnerable to climate change in this scenario, and we need this adaptation. But this also comes not just from the forest fires itself. Is of course the main issue we need to tackle and to assure the sustainability of our forests. But it's also the approach and this attemptive approach to create a coherent, multi-level approach to specific territories that are vulnerable to climate change, but they also have those other vulnerabilities and those challenges coalescing in those territories. So this pilot action from our side it's being coordinated from us, and we are developing still the partnership for it. But essentially, from our perspective, we are piloting an approach in Monchique, which is a rural area in Algarve. We are piloting that approach there of this multi-level and multi-sectorial approach. We'll test it to see if we can to learn from it and to mainstream it to other regions in Portugal. But this is our own specificity when it comes of the pilot action. But essentially, what we want to focus from an European perspective and with our European colleagues is how can we, because the issue is that this transition of this landscape transition that we're trying to promote does require a long time. It's not just these long-term perspectives of in the future, but it does require a time and a commitment from every stakeholders to assure this landscape transition. So how can we, in one hand, assure an effective development of these areas, assure their development, but also to assure that this transition of landscapes is done by with trust and developing better governance. We need to make sure that the actors on the ground actually not just are they have the ownership of these landscape transition strategies of the strategies that try to tackle these issues, but they are also trusting the process to assure that their actions on the ground, their implementation, will happen now and in the future, and that this transition and that this greater resilience of these places, of these vulnerable places, is achieved with all, by us all, and in a strong and coherent manner.
Thank you, Elisa. Now we have some minutes to share some questions, to debate or to remark. I asked for the 5 participants if they have some notes they want to do it before I tackle some questions we received. I don't know who want to start to say something to close the process. Miss Elisa Ferreira, maybe. No. Eduardo?
Yes, but this, I just want a couple of words, I think that, in my opinion, this event went far beyond my initial expectations. I did not expect so many people attending this event. It's not easy to capture so many people nowadays because there are so many online events going on. And the presentations were very interesting. And I just leave a challenge for my director, Pedro, which is there listening to me. If we can have the possibility, maybe, because only with his support and in my institution, of course, the possibility maybe in the next couple of years to have a physical meeting maybe discussing regional development trends or something alike, that we can go back to this subject and bring this everyone together in Lisbon. That it's a challenge that I leave to my director. You know, maybe he can respond if he thinks it's interesting or not. But thanks for everybody that has been assisting and for the excellent presentations is what I have to say. And thank you, António. You were the perfect person. That's why I chose you for being the chair. And we will meet again because we all have a lot of things to discuss privately, of course. And that's what I have to say. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Eduardo. Vasco, I don't know if you want to say something.
Well, just to thank you so much for the opportunity and to congratulate the organizers of this event for the depth and the insights it provided us about the territorial cohesion. I strongly wish that it can be continued because it has a lot of other approaches that could be developed, that could be deepened and can be of utmost utility for utmost usefulness for our discussion and for our work, not only as Committee of the Regions, but also to each one of the participants, to the ones that study and the ones that benefit from the territorial cohesion or the cohesion policy. So thank you so much, and I wish you well. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
So thank you very much for all participants and for all the debate. I think we have 3 or 4 questions with common points. I tried to address some summary for the questions. The point is, how can we grow good instruments for territorial cohesion and for increment the cohesion policies without lose all the learns we have and all the capacities we have in the field, and how can we integrate the position from the stakeholders of the process. It's a long-term process. We are all together for a long time. We have different experience and different approach. Every time we start to draw new instruments, we hear a little bit the call from the territory, and the territory needs to speak in different levels. And using this experience, everybody says, I'm the most capacity stakeholder to build a solution. But as we hear today, we just try almost everything. And maybe we need to recycle or circulate our knowledge and our territory approach for doing the same but in a different way. I think the new territorial agenda appeal for this approach. We just try almost everything. Of course, it's new problems coming in and it's new solutions to drive to the territory, but maybe it's time to see with other eyes and see in another perspective. Some of the questions the participants are dropping in, it's about how can we grow instruments from local perspective with the eyes of European level. How can we do different and don't leave no one behind if all the questions, all the policies are driving different perspectives, and the implementing of these 30 years of cohesion policy bring some people outside of the process, and all we see around Europe, it's some people, some territories left behind, and they don't feel part of the process. And I think all this debate and all the questions are proposal for the audience. It's around this process. Of course, the connection between rural and urban process, it's part of this discussion because rural areas have a big part of this process of left behind. And how can we put all this together? The Commissioner Elisa Ferreira bring this idea. It's not just put someone in competitiveness and bring the rest with them. It's sharing competitiveness and sharing cohesion policies in the territory, but with the right approach for the problems. So I don't know if someone wants to say something about these number of questions or these problems, or left some ideas to finish this conference. Thank you. Eduardo, you have some questions for you. I don't know if you want to address it.
Well, I was waiting the other ones to take the floor. Well, what I can say is that one important conclusion is that to maintain this knowledge on the need on how to address territorial cohesion and territorial development trends is to keep discussing, is to keep maintaining networks, creating networks, and it's used in academics the concept of institutional thicknesses, which is trying to bring and transfer knowledge. And here, European cohesion policy has a lot of instruments that have helped to do this, especially through the European Territorial Cohesion Objective, which is called, for instance, the Interact, which makes these constant meetings between stakeholders that are interested in implementing European Territorial Cooperation. Also, the Committee of the Regions has a role in this. That's why I was waiting for Dr. Vasco to intervene, because they are important in maintaining these institutional thicknesses and this knowledge transfer, which is crucial for us to make the right decisions, because when we have a lot of money, like cohesion policy, and then we don't use it appropriately, then things don't go the way it's supposed to be. And ultimately, the most important thing is the common good. Is not the good of my region. I want my own swimming pool. I want my money. But if it's better in the end that we invest in just a regional pole, a medium city, and in the end everybody gains. And if this is sold very well to everybody, by politicians, maybe not by academics, then I think everybody is willing to accept this new policy lens, new policy direction. But this is the job that António Ramos has to do in Portugal, isn't it? All the time. And Vasco, as a politician, he knows how to do it. I'm an academic. I'm just produce theories and studies. I'm not maybe the right person to communicate maybe with stakeholders, but Vasco knows how to do it. You know how to do it. The ministers know how to do it. Elisa really knows how to do it, and also Elisa Vilares. So that's why I was waiting for your comments on this. So I say.
Well, I don't know if anyone wants to say something more. Well, in that case, thank you very much again for the resilience. We have a lot of people see us today, and they start from the beginning to the end. It's a good sign. And thanks again for the organization and the participation and share of the ideas. Thank you very much. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bom dia. Posso dar encerrada a sessão, então? Então, com licença.